This is huge news. There is actually new inflation relief that has been approved. Many people will be receiving a $300 stimulus payment this month, but some action has to be taken by Congress in order for you to receive the stimulus check. Now, rebates worth up to $300 will be going out to more than 600,000 Delaware taxpayers next month under an inflation relief plan declared the General Assembly. The rebate, which lawmakers approved after first weighing whether to institute a gas tax holiday, will be in the form of actual stimulus checks mailed to people who filed a tax return in 2021 for the previous year's earnings. The cost is around $186 million to the state, which currently has a surplus of about $1 billion for the fiscal year that ends June 30th. In addition to the rebate for taxpayers, the state will also send around $300 checks to some 168,000 adult residents who did not file a return last year. The state hopes to identify those recipients through public records like driver's license. Now, checks for those recipients will be going out after July 1st, once lawmakers appropriate the $50 million cost in the state budget, which usually approved at the end of June. The state has a detailed timeline of when checks will be mailed, and the governor signed a bill just minutes after the Senate passed it. Delaware Governor told reporters, "My hope is that these direct payments will provide some measure of relief for Delaware families who are dealing with higher costs at the grocery store and at the gas pump. These direct payments to Delaware families are part of a broader, responsible budget proposal." Now, CNN released a poll this week that shows the president repeated efforts to highlight undeniably strong aspects of the economy's post-crisis rebound and to offset blame for its bad spots are not working. The main culprit is inflation, a force the White House initially underestimated and has failed to tame. It has been decades since Americans experienced this cycle of spiraling costs for basic goods and services. That shock is twinned with rising gasoline prices that also hurt family budgets across the country. The result is a looming political disaster for Democrats, with voters in a disgruntled mood ahead of midterm elections that were already historically thought tough for a first-term president. Federal Chairman Jerome Powell said during a news conference, "I'd like to take this opportunity to speak directly to the American people. Inflation is much too high, and we understand the hardship it's causing. We are moving expeditiously to bring it down," he says. The Federal Reserve this week says that it's raising interest rates by half percentage point to get a handle on the worst inflation that Americans have seen in the past 40 years. It's the first time in 22 years that a central bank has hiked rates this much. The decision was unanimous, with all 12 members of the policy-setting Federal Open Market Committee agreeing on it. In March, the Fed ramped up its benchmark borrowing rate for the first time since late 2018, increasing it by a quarter percentage point. The rate increase will make new home and car loans and payments on credit card balances more expensive, but in the process, it could cool the housing market and making it easier to buy a home and taking the heat out of rising prices.
King Abdullah to the United States Capitol. Last time we were together here was July 2021, and at that time we went forth with the 2021 Defense Cooperation Agreement about fighting ISIS, about stability and security in the region. I've worked with His Majesty and his family for decades. We have always in Congress had the benefit of his wisdom, his knowledge, and his judgment of the region. So we thank, again, my last visit was 2019, pre-COVID, and we saw then the hospitality that Jordan was extending to the Syrian refugees. Very grateful, especially to the children, Your Majesty. Now we have issues that relate to security, to the economy, to climate crisis, and we look forward to hearing from His Majesty about energy and water in the region and how we fight the pandemic. So again, we're happy to welcome His Majesty and His Royal Highness, the Prince, and always a strong bipartisan interest in what His Majesty has to say, which will follow our meeting with you. It's now my honor to once again present His Majesty King Abdullah of Jordan.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much for this opportunity to be back here with you, to thank you and the Congress for the overwhelming support that our country always receives from you. We're here, as you said, to talk on a multitude of subjects of how to move our region towards the light, and I'd be very interested to get into depth of how we look at a new vision for the Middle East to get leaders to move stability forward, especially since we've lost 2 years to COVID, and again, you mentioned the instability of what we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia affecting stability and food security issues in our country, in our region. So I'm looking forward.
I was telling Jonathan how embarrassing this all is. Except that I accept every kind word. I accept every kind word on behalf of my colleagues in the Congress who had the courage to support all of the things that you said. I just have the privilege of getting the credit, but they have had the courage to get the job done. Thank you so much, Peter Kovler. Thank you and Judy for your leadership in making so many wonderful things possible based on values and presented with great beauty. For your long-standing leadership to preserve and promote the legacy of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, in the interest of time, I will associate myself with the remarks of so many have gone before about the beauty and the values and all the leadership of Franklin Roosevelt, but I do have some things to say, so if it looks like I'm sticking to my notes, it's because in the interest of time, because there's so much to say. But let me first say that when the Brown Education Middle School led us in the pledge to the flag, and wasn't it lovely? And thank you to your principal.
So when are we actually going to receive a fourth stimulus check? Okay everyone, so we all know that the American Rescue Plan was signed into law back in March of 2021. And since then, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars were actually sent out. And I know that there are still millions of Americans that are anxiously waiting for Joe Biden in Congress to step up to the plate and send out a fourth check. Now, following the past 2 round stimulus that brought a cash boost to medium and low-income families, many people are also worried about inflation. And inflation actually rose at the fastest pace in nearly 40 years. That happened all in December, as rapid price gains fueled consumer fears about the economy and sent President Biden's approval rating tumbling. According to a new Labor Department report, the Consumer Price Index rose 7% in December from just a year ago, marking the fastest increase since June of 1982. That's when inflation hit 7.1%. The CPI, which measures a group of goods ranging from gasoline and healthcare to groceries and rent, jumped 0.5% in the 1 month period from November. And that is really ridiculous. Economists expected the index to show that prices surged only 7% in December from the 3-year-ago period at 0.4% from the previous month. Price increases were widespread, although energy prices fell 1.1%. On average, gasoline cost around 50% more than it did last year. Food prices have also climbed 6% higher over the year, increased by nearly 40%. So that is why it is extremely important for Congress to send out more stimulus checks sooner than later. Jerome Powell has already signaled that the United States has new plans to fight inflation. There are multiple lawmakers that are lobbying for another stimulus payment to be approved.